Hello, my name is Jerome Paige, and while we're waiting for folks to join, let me describe the 1960s project. This is our seventh Facebook Live. We're also broadcasting simultaneously on YouTube and on Instagram. In the 1960s project, what we're doing is we're sharing what's on the minds of those who were in high school during the years 1960 to 1969. We'll be recalling, reminiscing, reflecting, and sharing. I want to welcome you and thank you for watching, for reading the blogs, and for commenting. Lots of tiny thoughts, many, many large memories from the lives of those who were in high school in the 1960s. I have three guests today, and our topic will be college life, in particular, college life at Howard University. One guest was a first-year student in 1961, another in 1964, and another in 1966. I was a first-year student at Howard University in 1965. So we cover the years 1961, 1964, 1965, and 1966. Let me share a couple highlights from those years, and I will take the highlights from the Hilltop. The Hilltop was the student newspaper on campus. And from the October 27th, 1961 Hilltop, the headline was Willa reigns as homecoming queen. Willa Monteth, who was a senior in the sociology department, was the homecoming queen for that year. Also in that same edition, there was an article that talked about an upcoming debate. Imagine this, the debate was between Bayard Rustin and Malcolm X. And Bayard Rustin in the article was characterized as an integrationist. In the history of Malcolm X, at that time, he was known as a Black separatist or Black nationalist. His views would change over time. But that debate between Rustin and Malcolm X foreshadows debates we're having today. There's been a constant question facing the African American community is what path should we travel? What road should we take? Should we take one of fully integrating into the society or one where we separate ourselves from the society? The October 23rd, 1964 Hilltop announced that Jackie Walters was the homecoming queen. And also in that same edition, there was an article on 289 students who were being recognized at the annual Honors Day. And these were students from engineering and architecture, from the College of Liberal and Fine Arts, and from the School of Pharmacy. The Hilltop in October 9th, 1965, announced the opening of a small business guidance center. And I believe that that center is still going today. So the Small Business Center at Howard University is one of the popular centers here in Washington, D.C. One of the tidbits that I ran across in the 1960s, that edition of the Hilltop, was a poem by Tony Gittins. And I don't think I really knew Tony at Howard, But many years later, he was found the Black Film Institute, which ran films in the District of Columbia up at the University District, first at Federal City College and then at the University District of Columbia. And that it's expanded many years later to become a prominent worldwide film festival each spring in Washington, D.C. I'm quite sure Tony might be embarrassed about the poem he wrote back in 1965. I'll read the opening 3 lines. I tried to fall in love, to be happy. I really tried, but I cried. And when she told me that she loved me, I just couldn't believe that she could leave her heart with me. I wonder what Tony would think about those words today. In the 1966, October 21st edition of the Hilltop, we've talked about this in the previous live. Robin Gregory wins royalty race was the headline. What was significant about that was Robin Gregory was the first homecoming queen, which at that time we would call an afro. Another headline in 1966, that edition of the Hilltop, was that Carmichael talks power to closed audience. And there was an article about Stokely Carmichael, who would later become Kwame Ture, talking about the ideas of Black power on the campus. So in the years, we had homecoming, we had academic honors, we had political life. So my guests are Judith Winston, who was a first-year student she was a first-year student in 1961. And Gina Carson was a first-year student in 1964. And David Lang was a first-year student in 1966. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can speak a little louder. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you for having us, Jerome.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, there we go. Bring a little energy to this.
All right.
So, Judy, since you were 1961, I'll start with you.
Okay.
What were your initial experiences when you arrived on Howard's campus as a first-year student?
I was shocked because I had never been on Howard's campus before. I, of course, had read the catalog and seen pictures, and I was just delighted to find a beautiful, beautiful place. It was a bright, sunny day, I'll remember. I remember that pretty well, and there were groups of Howard students there to meet those of us getting off of the train from New York and Philadelphia, and I guess Wilmington as well. And they took us to the Quad, the women's dormitory, which is a beautiful, beautiful building. And we had packets of materials, orientation materials that they sent to us, or that they gave to us as we arrived. And so that was just, I was just delighted. I didn't quite know what to expect. And I thought I had definitely made the right decision and was very happy to be there.
So Judy, you came from what city and what high school?
I came from Philadelphia. I had graduated the June before from the Philadelphia High School for Girls.
And how would you characterize life in high school as you were leaving high school versus that coming to campus? Was there a big shock? Was there you encountered similar students or?
Not at all. Well, in some respect, of course, as I mentioned, it was a girls' high school, so there were all girls in my class, and it was majority white. And I had some interesting and somewhat disturbing incidents in high school along the lines of race. I didn't really know very much about our racial history, about civil rights, about segregation and all of that. So I came to Howard very, very naive about my own history as an African-American woman and the history of our people. And it has been an eye-opening and very valuable lifelong valuable experience, both coming to Howard, seeing students, Black students from all over the country and all over the world. And of course, there were some white students there and students of other ethnicities from different parts of the world.
Okay. So, and Gina, you were at, where did you go to high school?
I went to high school in DC at McKinley High School.
Okay.
Mhm.
So you were a first year student in 1964. Had
Yes.
even though you were local, did you know
Yes.
anything about Howard University before you arrived on the campus?
Yes, I think as most DC students, you know about the universities and colleges that are in the city. And I had been on campus actually early in my high school years. I was on a bus tour of the architecture of DC, and Howard was on the tour. So I was exposed there early in my high school career. And then as most kids from Washington, when Howard had their homecoming, you might find yourself up on that campus. And I was there at one of the big bonfires that they had. So I knew where it was. and I really had it was sort of like a home, you know, like it's a comfort level. I always knew it was there. You know, I knew where it was. I could walk on campus anytime, you know, I wanted to. So.
Well, were you a residential or non-residential student at Howard?
I was. I lived in the city. So
okay, so you commuted.
I commuted, yeah.
Okay, and did you have any fellow classmates from your graduating class who attended Howard that you knew of?
Oh yes, from high school. Oh, a good deal of us, a lot of us went to Howard. None in the College of Pharmacy where I wound up, but in architecture, just in liberal arts, of course, and fine arts. They were all over the place. So.
Well, how did you feel visiting the camp or coming to the campus as a student? You talked about visiting and sneaking up there at homecoming. I don't know whether your parents allowed you to do that.
We're not going to talk about it.
But as now you're a student, how did you feel?
I felt like I had, when I first got there, I think it was the introductory week. I think Campus Pals was there on campus, and you go to the student center and you meet your campus pal, and you with a group and you tour campus and all of that. I looked at it differently. It wasn't like it became a little awesome to me, and it was. I mean, as it was said before, you meet people from all over the country, actually from all over the world, and they're all naive and dumb like you. And it was wonderful. I think to me too, I love the campus. I love I have to say I always thought the yard should have more trees. But bar that, I love Founders Library. I loved in pharmacy you're in the valley, you know, so you come up and get a breath of fresh air. So the Founders Library, where I did a lot of studying to get away from the School of Pharmacy, and the Fine Arts Building. These places you could walk in and you see an exhibit or at Fine Arts or and that kind of thing. It was wonderful for me.
All right. So David, you arrived in 1966. Where were you? Where did you come from?
I came from St. Louis, Missouri. I went to Charles Sumner High School, which was the first Black high school for the children of former slaves built west of the Mississippi River. And it was also the largest high school in Missouri. And it was basically an all-Black high school. We had one white student in the school.
Was it a public school or private school?
Public school.
It was a public school.
Right, it was a public school. It was the public school for Black children. Most of the Black public school teachers sent their children there, whether they lived in the zone or not. Their children all ended up at Sumner.
And so you went from a predominantly or mostly Black high school to a predominantly Black college or historically Black college. Was that your first choice, Howard University?
Well, no, actually, I wanted to be. I originally planned on attending an Ivy League school, so I had applied to Harvard and Yale, and Penn. I got in the University of Pennsylvania, but my biology teacher, who was my mentor, talked me out of that and said I would be happier at a historically Black college undergraduate. If I wanted to go to a white institution, I should wait to graduate school. And I trusted him, and I followed his advice, and I'd gotten a scholarship to Howard, so that's how I landed on campus.
What was your reaction when you arrived on campus as a first-year student?
Well, I was awestruck. Number one, I remember the experience of the campus pals, and I immediately sized up that the older male campus pals use the campus pal experience to hit on the freshman women. And so I had thoughts of in the future becoming a campus pal. And and then I remember going to the Harriet Tubman Quad, and I've never seen such a collection of beautiful Black people in one place, women and handsome men. It was an awesome experience.
Okay. Well, I would share the same as you. I wasn't thinking about the campus pals that hit on women, but the awesomeness of the experience. I came from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania as well. Judy was from Philadelphia. I graduated from Germantown High School. It was, and looking back, it was probably, you could call it fairly integrated. And it wasn't integrated by design. It just happened to be the neighborhood school. And the neighborhood school, the neighborhoods were undergoing change. Black folks were moving in and white folks were moving out. So there was a lag. So there was a period where you had a fair amount of racial integration. And so when I get to Howard, I mean, those school was integrated in that sense. My neighborhood life, as many Black folks, we shopped at a lot of Black businesses. We went to Black church. So we had our everyday life was primarily Black. And then school, we had an integrated experience. So when I get to Howard, and I'm not quite sure, I'm still trying to remember how I chose Howard and how I got to Howard. I mean, I know physically how I got there. My father drove me down. But what the process was from going to high school to Howard, I'm still trying to work through my archives of my brain to figure that out. But when you saw the mass of just beautiful Black people, I would echo your terms, David. It was just awesome to see that, and it's something that still, when I go on campus, even today, and you see folks around, I still have the same type of feeling of pride. So Judy,
Yes.
What type of campus activities were you involved in?
Well, I remember the first freshman orientation assembly that we had. The speaker, who was the major speaker, was the president of the College of Liberal Arts, and he gave a presentation that encouraged all of us to become involved in campus life. I was very excited to do that, and went over to the Student Center immediately thereafter to sign up for something. And I was actually asked if I would join what I believe was a newly created committee of faculty and students called the Values Committee, in which we wanted to talk about how we would be able to get students and faculty and others to come up with a set of, or to understand a set of values that were particularly important to us as African American students. And I remember, I have to tell you, I don't remember too much of the discussion, but I do remember that the person who chaired that committee was Dean Evans Crawford, who was Dean of the chapel at that time. And I was just thrilled to be in a committee that included both students and faculty members. That's not something that been part of my high school education. And I joined the honors program. I found out I would be able to join I was invited to join the honors program, which I did. And I was so very nervous about doing well academically to be able to keep my scholarship and stay in the honors program. I spent a lot of time in the library, and in the library there was something called the honors room in which we students were able to go in and study quietly in a group, and it was monitored by seniors who were also in the honors program. So I didn't do a lot, actually. I didn't go to parties. I went to the assemblies. I went to the special programs. I went to that debate between Malcolm X and Bayard Rustin.
Okay.
And I went to the homecoming activities. By the way, the homecoming queen was Wilma Monteith. And,
Okay.
And I'll just stop there and let others speak.
Okay, but we'll come back. Well, I think somebody would like to know about this debate between Bayard Rustin and Malcolm X.
Oh yeah, it was the one of the highlights of that year, and it didn't happen easily because there were a number of faculty members who did not want Malcolm X on the campus, and they were protesting, and they practically shut it down. And then the student body president, Michael Winston, is now my husband, has been for 57 years, went over to talk to the president. And the concern was that there would be, students, there would be riots and, confrontations on all of this. And Michael tells a story, and I'll make this brief as well. He tells a story of saying to the president, Malcolm X has spoken on traditionally white campuses all over the country. Nobody had any problems with that, and there's no reason to believe that he couldn't speak to a group of Howard students easily and without incident. And so the president said, well, okay, but let me tell you that if anything goes wrong, it's going to be on you. Your responsibility. So, but it worked out well. They filled they filled this auditorium, Crampton Auditorium, early because it had been learned that Malcolm X was having a group of his followers on buses coming down to sit in on this discussion, and there was some concern about what that would mean. And so they rounded up members of the student body, rounded up students to come to the debate early to fill it up. And by the time the buses got there was no room in the auditorium, so there was it was piped in somehow, so that another room that they could hear. So, one other thing about that.
One more thing, Judy. One more thing.
That was funny. The student council had gone to a lot of trouble of setting up this pre-debate dinner where they had everybody there, and it turns out Malcolm X wouldn't eat a thing. He would not touch any of the food because he was afraid he might be poisoned. So, so anyway, but the debate was quite thrilling, actually, to hear.
Maybe we'll have to have a program on people who had attended that debate. And Gina,
yes,
what type of campus activities caught your interest? What were you active in?
Well, as a freshman, I joined the Hilltop. I was used to working on a school newspaper, so it was a natural progression for me. And at first I typed, which I learned how to do badly, but I typed anyway. And then eventually they let me write a couple of articles. And then our dean at the College of Pharmacy brought all the students together, all the freshman students, and told them because the students had just gone all over campus doing different things. And he told us basically, you're not going to be able to have extracurricular activities and be successful in the College of Pharmacy. So that being said, I tried to hang on to the hilltop as long as I could, but he was right. You couldn't do those two things.
Okay.
So so what I did do is there were pharmacy organizations in the College of Pharmacy, Student Pharmacy Association, and those kinds of things. So that's sort of what I did. Also, talking about campus life, Crampton had, I used to go watch Bill Cosby up there, and Roberta Flack and all of those folks. And I remember one time when I was studying in the pharmacy library, there was a rumor that Dr. King was going to be on campus, and everyone just went crazy. And they said that he was going to visit someone, a friend of his, in the quad. So like everybody else, I was out there across the street, and I actually saw Dr. King right there on campus. It was amazing. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So, and then as a commuting student, the Punch Out was a very important place for me. And
so what card game did you play? Pinochle or Bid Whist?
Well, Bid Whist. But I enjoyed cards too much. I was banned from the Bid Whist game after a while because I talked too much. But yeah, the Punch Out was fun. And the different that show Different World. They showed showed students where they had a place to eat and socialize, and that just reminded me of the Punch Out so much.
David, at Howard University, you're a first-year student in 1966. It's 1966 and subsequent years. What types of campus activities were you involved in?
Well, I pledged Omega in '68 as a sophomore. Prior to that time, I was in an informal social group, male social group, called the Mellow Fellows. We were all into intramural sports, and at the risk of being immodest, I was the star of the intramural softball league and football league. I couldn't play basketball. I couldn't play basketball, but we won the championship my freshman year, both football and softball. We beat the PE majors to their dismay, and we won the championships as sophomores as well. And then I got recruited to the big leagues when I started to pledge Omega. One of the reasons they wanted me was because of my intramural athletic progress. I'll be playing in the fraternity league. So for those who are not familiar with Greek life, what do you mean Omega? Omega Psi Phi. Yeah, okay. You're talking to me. I understand it, but what about people? Well, Omega Psi Phi is one of the historical Black fraternities, Greek organizations, along with the Deltas, the Alpha, Phi Alphas on the male side, the Delta Sigma Thetas on the female side, the Alpha Kappa Alphas on the female side. So we had lots of sororities and fraternities, and that was a big part of campus life. So that consumed my intramural, that consumed my social life from sophomore through graduation. Oh, did you ever become a campus pal to hit on the young girls? Never did. Okay, all right. Well, let me ask another round of questions here, and that deals with academic preparation. What types of courses did you take, and how do you feel that Howard prepared you for your subsequent careers? So we'll start with David this time, and then do with Gina, and then Judy. Well, I was in the honors program as well. Now, when I got to Howard initially, I hadn't tested high enough on the SAT to get into the honors program, but I think I got all A's and one B, and I think I had a 3.8 average at the end of my freshman year, so I got into the honors program in my sophomore year. I was invited to the honors program. So the honors program was interesting I didn't particularly like it, or the methodology of the instruction. And I didn't particularly care for it. And um, I thought it was somewhat bougie, if I can put it that way. but I was in any event. And as far as the instruction is concerned, I got a great education at Howard. I was well prepared when I left Howard to compete at any other institution in the United States. I went to Michigan Law School.
Oh, we lost David. Okay, well, he'll probably figure that out. We'll keep moving on, because there was a question. Somebody wanted to know about pledging. What was pledging like back in 66, 67, 68, and 69? Specifically, were they hazing and things like that? So if David comes back in, we'll pose that question to him. And Gina, what was academic life like? What types of courses did you take, and were you prepared for your career?
I was well prepared. Of course, in the College of Pharmacy, you have one curriculum, and everybody takes the same thing. I think at that time, as all freshman students did, you took entrance exams to see if where you placed in English and math. They don't do that anymore, but I placed out of everything. So that was kind of invigorating, knowing I'm supposed to be there. But David mentioned something. I never took an SAT. I have never taken an SAT, so I don't even know how I wound up there. But I did. I didn't take a standardized test till I took the graduate record. So I don't know how I got there. So
here's a question for you. Somebody asked, were there any professors that inspired you?
Yeah. Well, we had wonderful professors. Our coursework, I think, at the College of Pharmacy prepared you to open your own independent pharmacy. So we had business courses as well as law and those kinds of things. Besides all of it, we took every chemistry on the campus, I think, from general chemistry all the way to physical chemistry. So, but I loved it. I loved chemistry, so that was good for me. I think we also had a course, which I don't believe they still have, but pharmacognosy, which is now very popular, where you're taught you're taught medicinal plants, what medicines comes from what particular plant. Mm-hmm. So now people are into that evolution now, but we're going back to that. But
so did you ever play the role of apothecary? Did you ever mix some?
Oh, yes, that was very important in our curriculum. Dr. Zalecki, wonderful man, taught that course. And he always said that we have to make our products with pharmaceutical excellence. So we made creams and solutions, and I got yelled at because I forgot to put tops on bottles and things like that. I didn't know, they stopped the whole lab. Who is not putting the tops on the bottles? Anyway, but one of my favorite preparations was orange, I think it was orange peel tincture. We had to bring 8 oranges to lab, and we made a tincture out of the oranges, and the place smelled wonderful. So it was challenging, it was hard, but it was well worth it. And when I left, I knew I was ready. I was ready for it. We had to take a national board, which I passed on the first try. I did an internship at Children's Hospital, which I was well prepared for. So I thought it was a great career for me.
And Judy, what was you're at Howard University?
Yeah.
What kind of classes did you take? What was your major, and how did it prepare you for subsequent life?
Well, I was a history major, and I minored in political science. And I am absolutely certain and confident that it prepared me well. It was an excellent education. I would compare it to any in the country. And it was an education that came to me from brilliant professors. My favorite professor was Harold Lewis, who was in the history department. And I had Bernard Fall taught in the political science department. He had fought in the French resistance in the World War II and was subsequently killed some years after I left Howard in Vietnam. So he knew a lot about Vietnam and reported on Vietnam and wrote about
Now, what was the race of Harold Lewis and what was the race of Bernard Fall?
Harold Lewis was Black, and he was an Amherst graduate, had gotten his PhD from American University, like many of the Black professors in Washington who started teaching before they needed to have a PhD. It was I had Annette Eaton was a wonderful classics teacher, but I was just exhilarated with my classes. First of all,
what about Bernard Fall? What was his?
He was white. He was white.
And when you say he fought in the French resistance, do you mean like in France?
In France, yes, he was French.
Okay.
But he had a very clear English accent. I mean, it didn't sound like he was French. He was, I remember one of the first things he said to us as we sat in class, David, you'll appreciate this. He looked at the class, it was men and women in the class. He said, ladies, I have a beautiful, beautiful wife. So anybody who earns an A in here will have earned an A.
Okay.
I didn't find him attractive at all, and I think most of my female classmates didn't as well. I just thought that was really strange thing to say to a class. But he was a good teacher.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I'd like to comment on that. So I took Russian literature. I think I was a sophomore, and we had a Russian professor, white, of course, and I was competing with this sister to get the highest grade in the class. And she was extremely attractive. And it was very clear that she was the apple of his eye. So that was the first time I ever felt like I was being discriminated against in grades on the basis of my sex. But it definitely was going on.
Was that David Korn? Was that David Korn who taught that class?
I have no idea what his name
was.
Hey, David, I do have a question for you, and I'll ask this question and also pose the final question that we'll do the round on. Somebody wanted to know what was pledging like back in...
what was pledging like?
Like where they're hazing. So that's the first question. And then the second question, after you finish telling us about pledging, this is where our final round of questions here is, what advice would you give to a first-year student today? So you have two questions. Go
All right. Well, pledging was the real deal, serious hazing. We got our butts beat with paddles. We got hit in the chest. It was an ordeal. It was a rite of passage, so to speak. And it's not, I'm glad they changed hazing. I eventually became the associate dean of pledges after I went over. And so I tried to keep the pledges from being beaten, etc. But there was a lot of opposition to that. So I kind of, in a sense, I got like, the victim of a purge because I just was too soft on the pledges. And so that was one of the issues. And one of the things I remember about pledging, I lost my scholarship as a result of pledging that year because I was always beat up and tired. And so my junior year, I didn't have my scholarship. And so, and I never told my parents, but, tuition was so cheap, I was able to put myself through school my junior year with my earnings from my summer job and then my part-time jobs I had on campus. And I got my scholarship back, so pledging was rough. And so that was quite an experience, but it had its good points too. We were the stars of the campus, so we loved that part of it. So
what advice would you have for it?
Well, I would say that pledging was pledging Omega was one of the highlights of my life. We still have The friendships were my line brothers. We're very close. We're still in touch. We get together periodically, and so those friendships are friendships that you just can't make any other way. So I highly recommend it.
So Judy, what advice would you give to a first year student? Somebody says 2020, what advice would you give them? You were a first year student in 1961. So
right.
What do you say to somebody in 2020?
Well, I would tell a new freshman to really take advantage of all that is available, not just in the classroom. I mean, it's important to do well academically, but to take advantage of the life outside of classroom. Just David talked about meeting people. There were so many people from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And that in itself was an education to get to know those people and to not only compare the things that you had in common, but also the differences of experiences. So I think that probably, and to really to not neglect your studies. I mean, it's really important because that is going to make a difference in terms of your ability to move on, as many of us were able to do, into professions in graduate school and law school.
Gina, we'll give you the last word. So what advice would you give to a freshman or a first year student today? Oh, she's having some video difficulties. We can't hear her. So we'll give it a minute here. We can't hear you, Regina. Okay. Well, let me say, thank you very much, the three of you, for participating in this special edition of the 1960s Project. Each of you were in high school in 1960s. Each of you were first-year students at Howard University in 1960. I learned a lot. I enjoyed listening to the stories. And if someone in our viewing or listening audience would like to participate in the 1960s Project, we're always looking for people to send us their reflections. We'd appreciate getting those. We have a lot of exciting new topics coming up. And just to remind everybody that it's every Tuesday at 5 p.m. We're having our lives, which are broadcast on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Instagram. So we'll have our blog poster up every Tuesday. It wasn't a special blog post for this edition. And we enjoy just coming together and sharing and reflecting, and as I'm fond of saying, remembering those tiny thoughts and expanding on those big memories. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 5.
All right. Enjoy it, guys. All right.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you.